Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities such as new companies and potential business partners and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDnet for your free $5 to invest and start investing and networking on public.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. Joe Samaniego here, along with Kobe Lambs from the Podium Finish, Joshua Birch from Joshua Birch Motorsports, and Matthew Bro. A big thank you to our Patreon subscribers. Call the show Mark and Robin for investing in the Grid Network. You too can invest in the Grid Network through Patreon or buy me a coffee, a one-time contribution to us here at the Grid Network or to one of your favorite on-air personalities. Especially, I know, Joshua, you got a lot of calling this weekend with the sprint race weekend, and that's where we're going to start out with, Matthew, the Brazilian Grand Prix, and it's a sprint race weekend.
Absolutely. So the Brazilian Grand Prix in Sao Paulo is a favorite to many and has seen some very memorable moments. Later today, the second F1 sprint race in Sao Paulo, which is the final sprint race of the year, will take place. But for the first time, a Haas car is leading the field. Kevin Magnussen leads the field to the grid. But can he lead the first lap? He got the pole by laying down a very quick lap before George Russell got stuck in the gravel trap. As the rain picked up, everyone was on intermediate tires and could not surpass Magnussen's time. The weather today is cloudy with a range of 17 to 52% chance of rain, so not the most predictable situation. So starting with you, Joshua, can Kevin Magnussen shock the world in the sprint and pull off an upset win as Sebastian Vettel did with Toro Rosso at Monza back in 2008?
Now, normally I would say no, absolutely not, because Verstappen's standing second alongside him and he'll just breeze through as he always does throughout the season. But we've got weather incoming that everybody's sort of crossing the fingers and crossing the toes is going to hit the circuit pretty much like it did yesterday in qualifying. Now, that Haas car has just got something right with it this weekend. Usually we're saying it's something wrong, but it's got this strange allure that it's good in the slippery, damp, dry conditions that we had as well. It's where it shines. So if it's like that, which it should be, then Magnussen, who had the fastest car, had the fastest sector times, can breeze through. He wasn't just quick at the end of qualifying number 3 before the rain came, with it being first on the track. He was quick in Q1. He was quick in Q2 as well. So Magnussen's got the car and he's got the pace. So if it's wet, dampy, yeah, Magnussen could take the win for the sprint and start on pole for the main race on Sunday as well. If it's dry, I think we're going to see him drop back to around about 3rd or 4th on the grid as well, and Verstappen take the win. It's very much like nobody can actually anticipate what's going to happen too much this weekend, but I'm certainly rooting for Magnussen to take a sprint race win and start on pole for the main race tomorrow.
Yeah, certainly, Josh. And I think the world would really love to see a Kevin Magnussen and Haas F1 victory, even if it's just sprint race. And while a wet racing surface, can certainly make things more unpredictable and give Haas a fighting chance in those type of conditions. Unfortunately, I'm not sure even the rain can help Haas try to dethrone Red Bull and Max Verstappen in this sprint race. It would be quite a wonderful feel-good underdog story for Haas to get some type of victory in Formula One in a race, but unfortunately, I just don't see that happening. Even with the rain, I think it would take the perfect storm for Haas to get this done.
Yeah, then another thing I want to point out as well is Magnussen's teammate Mick Schumacher, who also is in a Haas, is starting last for the sprint race. So I don't know how often we see a first place and last place qualifying position for the same team, but I thought that was a very interesting thing to point out.
Quite rare, to be fair. To be honest with you, it's quite rare that they sort of bookend the grid like that. And with a lot of things about Schumacher, about him being replaced, as I was saying in the commentary yesterday, it's pretty much now, I would think, the death of his F1 career. The fact that in the same conditions, he's last overall and Magnussen has gone to the front. Don't forget, Schumacher and Mazepin were brought in to replace Magnussen and Grosjean because they were underperforming. Now it's all switched around again. So I love that it's the older generation, which Magnussen now has sort of flipped the coin, so to speak. So it's great.
Yeah, it's like a Haas sandwich on the grid, which I saw on Twitter. Also on Twitter, I want to point out really quick, it was very nice to see a bunch of the other teams showing support and tweeting out, like Mercedes, for example, were saying like congratulations and all that. So now let's start with what race we're going to be starting today with the sprint. So before we discuss the Grand Prix, we're going to talk about the sprint race. And last year, Lewis Hamilton was the class of the field the entire weekend. Remember, started 20th in the sprint, made his way all the way up to 5th, then took a 5-grid penalty, went back to 10th, still came back to win the race. But the Mercedes this weekend were not the fastest. So Russell's starting 3rd for today's sprint race. Hamilton is starting 8th in the lineup. And another news for Mercedes is FTX, which is one of its sponsors, a cryptocurrency exchange platform, declared bankruptcy yesterday. So it doesn't look like it's going too well over in the Mercedes camp. So do you believe, I'm going to start with you this time, Kobe, can Mercedes position themselves ahead in the Grand Prix lineup, or could they lose ground and have even worse starting positions?
Well, let's see. George Russell already has a decent starting spot for the sprint race. I think he'll be able to maintain that. But Lewis Hamilton, I think that's the driver who's going to want to improve his position. And unfortunately, there's just a couple of races remaining this season. I think that this is the absolute last chance for Mercedes to try to win a race this year and not go winless in 2022. Like with Haas F1, I think it would have to take a perfect storm for Mercedes to be able to win this race. So I think the goal has to be is to get George Russell to maintain that spot. I think, with the Haas up there, Russell can certainly, get up to 2nd and maintain 3rd, and Hamilton coming back from 8th. I think he'll certainly have some work to do in order to have a slightly better starting position this Grand Prix.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Kobe. We're getting a bit too close to the end of the season now as well. And Lewis Hamilton hasn't taken a pole position. He hasn't taken a race win this year. I know he says he doesn't think about those records as well. And the historics that he's won a Grand Prix and taken a pole position in every single season he's been in Formula One. That is very nearly slipping away. He's got one more chance to take pole in Abu Dhabi, and he's got 2 more chances to win a Grand Prix. If he wins the sprint, it doesn't count because it's a sprint race. So there's all sorts of things that can still crop up as well. But everybody is hoping that Lewis gets a win. But personally, the next time we will see Mercedes win, I've always said it this year, it'll be George Russell at the top. Russell has come from a Williams, which has been an absolute awful car, and he put that 2nd. He's had this year's Mercedes, which has also been awful, but not as bad as the Williams was, and he's given us pole positions, he's given us podiums, he's now ahead of the championship also than Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton has done nothing but complain all year long about how poor the car is. He's been complaining that his teammate hasn't been helping develop it as well. Lewis has done too much moaning this year, and now the car, it's too late for the season, it's too late for development. He says he wants to help, but in my personal opinion, Lewis moaning this year and being hard to by it's happened with 2014 regulations wasn't, and it was bagging him backwards and forwards as well. Ricciardo overtook him and outshone him once in 2014, won 3 of them, whereas Vettel didn't win a single race that year, and he left for Ferrari. So the fact that Lewis is A, staying with Mercedes is a very good sign, but B, you have down seasons. Schumacher had it in 2005. Vettel had it in 2014. You have down seasons, then you bounce back up again. I'm fully expecting Lewis to bounce back, but Russell, I think, will be the first one to get that race win. And I think, honestly, in the race this weekend, Hamilton's got an extra drive with him just being made an honorary citizen of Brazil. The fans are loving him as well, contrary to 2008. But they're loving him here, and I think we could see that sort of bounce back quite well. So it's a 50-50 with Mercedes, but I think Russell will have Hamilton this year, and then next year we'll see the old Lewis slowly starting to come back into the sport. As I don't know if it's my internet lagging in and out, because it's now saying I'm on low Wi-Fi, but this is on Ethernet, so anything can happen on these broadcasts.
Most definitely. And I think Mercedes has been in the news a lot too, because I believe George Russell is now coming closer to a record, which I believe is 13. I can't forget who set with most podiums to start a Formula One career without a victory. I believe Russell's at 9 now. So that's something to look out for, which Russell has been the better Mercedes driver this season. But Brazil is just one of those races that you can never count out Lewis Hamilton in terms of getting the job done. But that's something we'll be able to see today and tomorrow. So definitely looking forward to it. And then another driver who seems to be dominating at every moment of every single second of the Formula One season is Max Verstappen. And now with the chance of rain today, he has to be excited because he is well remembered for his brilliant rain performance here. And many anticipate he can get around Magnussen very easily, like Josh, you just mentioned earlier on the broadcast, and just simply run away with this sprint race. Charles Leclerc is starting 10th after being the only car on intermediate tires while everyone else was still on dry tires during Q3. Perez is ahead of him, starting 9th. So 2nd and 3rd on the standings this season are starting right next to each other today on the grid for the sprint race. And, of course, Perez is 2nd in points while Leclerc is 3rd. So which driver, I'm going to start with you this time, Josh, who finishes ahead of the other? Is it going to be Red Bull and Perez, or is it going to be Ferrari and Charles Leclerc?
I think it'd be Red Bull and Perez. For the one simple factor is that Ferrari don't know what they're doing anymore. I mean, you've probably heard as well. We've made jokes on here. We've made jokes on my commentary stream as well. We've said it all year. On a dry track, one of these days, Ferrari will put their drivers out on wet tires. And honestly, I could not believe that it happened yesterday. It was a dry track. There was no rain. The rain was coming in, but it should have been dries. They put them on inters. And honestly, Lawrence Meekis as well, who's the Ferrari strategist as well. I don't know how he's still got a job in Formula One. I honestly don't. He needs to be sacked immediately because it's literally clowns on the pit wall. It's unbelievable. The lunatics are running the asylum. There is no clear directive at Ferrari as to where they can go to get better because there's nobody in their ranks who can take over as team principal. There's nobody in their ranks that can take over as strategy development as well. It's rotten to the core, Ferrari now. And I think we need an infusion of fresh blood as well. You know, like how you've got sick vines that you take a good vine and you slice off the bad part of the stick. Hopefully they good vine heals the bad vine. That's what we need. We need an injection of new blood, new vines in there, and get Ferrari back up to the top. Because at the moment, it's just been completely destroyed. And Leclerc started to get a lot more frustrated. The amount of mistakes they've made this is unbelievable. And wet tires on a dry track is absolutely Red Bull with Perez. That is going to be a better strategy. And don't forget also, with Leclerc starting 10th, Sainz has got a 5-place grid penalty on Sunday. So Ferrari, realistically, are going to start as high as 8th and as low as possibly as 12th on the grid as well, with Sainz having a bad weekend. So it's a really strange situation for Ferrari where they're just sort of stopped caring, and Mercedes is trying to catch them up 40 points different in the constructors. So I don't think Ferrari will be the ones to watch this weekend, giving us some drama in the sprint race and main race tomorrow.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Josh. I think Sergio Perez and Red Bull are definitely the favorites to finish ahead of Ferrari and Leclerc. You know, for a simple fact that Red Bull have a much better car than the Ferrari does at this point, and you also bring up a lot of excellent points, Josh. You know, Ferrari can't seem to get out of Ferrari's way, and there's a whole bunch of things going wrong with that team. And I know, thinking back to coming back from the summer break, we were thinking Ferrari absolutely has to make some changes in order to improve this team moving forward, but they decided that it was best to keep going with the current group. And to be honest, it was like my Carolina Panthers, who kept Matt Rule on for so long, and we knew it was going to come to an end. We knew it was just so incompetent and it was not going to work. But you know what they did? They kept Matt Rule about five or so weeks into the season. Guess what? He got fired like everybody expected. So I don't understand when you see something going wrong, why you don't change it. And it seems like that's really biting Ferrari in the rear end right now, that they haven't made these changes. And if they go into this offseason and still don't make any changes, I'm sorry to the Tifosi out there, but there'll just be no hope for the Scuderia at this point.
And I'd like to ask you both a little bit of a follow-up to that. So, I mean, Josh mentioned the constructor standings and how it's a 40-point gap between Ferrari and Mercedes, which was a lot more earlier in the season, especially Mercedes has come on. And I believe it was Toto Wolff said something. He was looking forward more to a win than catching Ferrari in the standings. Is it possible, do you believe, that Mercedes, if they have a great day here, Brazil and Abu Dhabi, that they can not only catch a win with either Russell or Hamilton, or do you think they have a possibility of catching Ferrari in the constructor standings?
I think Mercedes do have a shot at catching Ferrari. There's 40 points between them as well, and Ferrari have a history of double DNFing. It's going to be a very difficult run. Certainly the sprint race helps them because there's points on offer, and Ferrari are going to get dropped out of it because Sainz will get his penalty awarded today of 5 places to set the grid out. So that'll kick him out of the results of the sprint. So that'll push him down as well. So there's a possibility that's going to help them. I think we're mainly going to see that run into Abu Dhabi. There's no way about it. I think Ferrari might just hold out unless they literally, Mercedes turn to Abu Dhabi, get a 1-2, and then that's 45 points odd, and Ferrari can do nothing about it. It's going to be fun. And I think Mercedes have sort of got their mojo back now. And I think Ferrari are losing the plot as always. So new blood at Ferrari, new team principal for next year, new technical director. My personal pick, Ruth Buscombe, who is the strategist at Alfa Romeo. She's amazing, absolutely amazing analyst, and skill determining exactly when to come in for the tops, when to get it right. So I would bring her over and put her in as lead strategist at Ferrari, and honestly, they'll be champions. Absolutely, I've always enjoyed Ruth Buscombe's work in Formula One. So bring her over and get rid of Lawrence Mekies. I don't know. I honestly do not know how he has still got a job in Formula One, because he is one of the most incompetent race strategists I've ever seen in Formula One. Ever. I've never seen so many mistakes and not get punished. I can't believe the big bosses at Ferrari are letting them get away with this. As I said, it is rotten to the core, and it's the Ferrari self-indulgence and self-opinionated, egotistical view that they can do no wrong. One, no driver in Ferrari, no person is better than Ferrari. And also, I'll use my middle finger with this one, nobody can criticize Ferrari as well. And you'll get the middle finger from them as well. And that's the thing, they can't take criticism. And I'm sure you see it as well. For me, I see young teams in the paddock. McLaren came in, acted a bit stuffy under the Ron Dennis era. It's opened up a lot more under Zach Brown. Christian Horner, yeah, he's a dead cert team principal, but Red Bull are one of the most fun teams to work with in the paddock. Haas as well are fun. Aston Martin have the sense of humour as well about them. You look at Mercedes as well, and Toto sort of coming out of his shell a lot more as well. And they're sort of the drive force behind getting everyone into a more competitive shape. They've been the carrot, really, on the stick for the other teams for so many years now. You look at Ferrari, and you don't see them as a modern 21st century team. You look at Ferrari, and you see them as grumpy old men that used to be there in the 80s. They're still the same. I can't accept it. We had signs in 2007, 2008 that they were changing, and they've just gone back. They are still the grumpy old people of Formula One. And to be honest with you, I'm getting a bit tired of Ferrari because they can't get anything right. And Formula One doesn't need Ferrari. Ferrari doesn't need Formula One. I think it's an ugly divorce just waiting to happen. They need to reinvent themselves. They need to be born to the 21st century 22 years later as well. And yeah, it just needs to be happening. This century is nearly going to be over by the time they're going to be competitive again in Formula One.
And to answer your follow-up, and to answer your follow-up question, Matthew, I think it's a good thing, that there's not 5 more races left on the calendar there than just a couple, because if there was 5 more races on the calendar, I think Ferrari would be in trouble to losing this spot in the constructors to Mercedes. I know several weeks ago, I believe we asked this question at Circuit. It might have been Circuit Americas, might have been in Mexico. Can't remember which one, but we were asked, do we think Mercedes can pass Ferrari in the constructors? And I say yes, but considering the amount of races we have left in the deficit, I think Ferrari will luck out, and just run out of races for Mercedes to catch them. So to answer your question, I think Ferrari will just barely hold on to their spot in the constructors.
Interesting. And so Josh doesn't get more upset about Ferrari, we're going to switch it over to AlphaTauri with one driver who goes by the name of Pierre Gasly. He wants to finish ahead and avoid any trouble, and there is a reason, because he is starting down in 12th place, and he is 2 points away from a race ban. It's not very often you see it, but we have seen it during this season. And of course, if he is involved in another incident which he is deemed at fault, he could be given 2 penalty points and have to sit out a race towards the end of this season. I'm going to start with you for this one, Kobe. Is this correct to have Gasly this close to a race ban, or is this showing the flaws of the FIA penalty point system?
And to be honest with you, Matthew, I think it's showing a lot of flaws. I believe Gasly called it, that it was embarrassing for him to be this close to a race ban. And with the penalty points, in situations like this, you think it would be, like for recklessness on the racetrack. And when you think of who Pierre Gasly is with the driver, he's not someone who is absolutely reckless, just crashing into everybody all the time. And I think the FIA is certainly going to have to look into making some changes to the penalty point system in the future. I think it's designed, as I said, to prevent, like the recklessness and what they call dodgems all the time on the racetrack. But I don't see Gasly as a type of driver to fit that. And if he gets a race ban, that would be such a shame. If I'm Gasly right now, I'm on pins and needles, terrified, that any little thing I do, right now, early part of next season, I have to be on my best behavior, because I get that next penalty point, I'm gonna be banned for one race, and that's something he certainly doesn't want, especially if it's going to be very early on in his tenure with the Alpine F1 team next year.
Yeah, there was this strange little rumor going around as well that Gasly was actually going to cross the pit lane exit twice, which would give him an extra 2 penalty points, and then miss out the race in Abu Dhabi as a result of it. That could happen realistically, but it's not going to happen, is it? The stewards have sort of ganged up on him a lot since Japan, since he nearly got killed by their own incompetence. And ever since then, every single race has been some form of penalty applied to him, some obscure rule that nobody actually knows about. So I think Gasly's definitely been targeted a lot recently as well by the stewards because he was so critical of them. But I think we'll see this develop, that he'll have to drive the first, 5-6 races next year, very, very cautiously indeed, before he has a race ban, which I don't think is fair, because Gasly is actually one of the cleanest drivers on the Formula One grid. He's accumulated all these penalties due to them being given to him minor breaches. Hamilton almost had the same thing a couple of years ago. It was really bizarre.
Interesting. And then just for the viewers at home who aren't sure about this penalty system, either of you can answer this. So if he does say at this race, or sorry, not this race, so not Brazil, but Abu Dhabi, he gets 2 penalty points. So does the race ban continue over for his first race at Alpine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, because it's the penalty points for the specific driver, not what team he's at, for 12 whole months. So those they get taken off after 12 months, each single point. So he's accumulated 10 in 12 months. That won't get taken off now until May next year. So he's going to have to do the first couple of races on 10 points. If he gets 2 more, then he has the race ban, even with he's at Alpine.
So what it sounds like is Pierre Gasly is going to be running very cautiously for the next however many months of his racing career in Formula One. Interesting. Thank you for answering that, especially for someone who's not as familiar, and for the people at home listening. We're all learning something new today. So now Gasly's last race, though, for the season is Abu Dhabi, assuming nothing bad happens for him and no race ban. Next year, he'll be with Alpine, like Kobe previously mentioned, which is the 4th place team this season in the constructor standing. Both drivers are in the top 10, and their rival McLaren has Lando Norris in 4th for the sprint race today. Ricciardo, who has not had the best season, is 14th, and he is behind both of the Alpine drivers. Lando is the only non-Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull driver on the podium in 2022, which I believe we mentioned that earlier this season. How often does it happen where just 3 teams are the only 3 to hit the podium besides, obviously, Lando Norris? So for you, Joshua, do you think front row for tomorrow's race and possibly get that, I guess, second podium of the season for him?
I presume that was Lando get on the podium. Yeah. I cut out a little bit, although it could have been you. So, but yeah, can Lando get himself on the podium? Yes, I think he can do a fantastic run. Should be able to get on the front row of the grid with a good sprint race as well. Lando was actually top in qualifying 1. He's a very fast driver, looking good. And this is a track that McLaren historically go very well at, even in the modern era of McLaren. Sainz got a podium here, Norris got a podium here, so I think Norris can and should get a podium here tomorrow. It's a small track, 4.3 kilometers, and it suits the driving styles of Lando Norris as well. He's still battling, by the way, his food poisoning. That's affecting him massively, but hopefully he can still do the sprint, because after that, technically they can still actually drop in Nick de Vries, but the cutoff for that is the sprint race. So he's got to be fit, or otherwise they can't do it, which means McLaren have wasted 500 quid getting a seat fitting done overnight for de Vries for absolutely no reason at all, which is always the case in Formula One. Buy now, panic later.
Yeah, and for Lando Norris, he's such a trooper. Still pushing through all those battling food poisoning. And Josh, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Lando Norris have like another issue earlier this year? I don't know if it was food poisoning, but he had some issues earlier this year. I can't remember what. Do you remember what happened?
He caught a virus or something or other it wasn't COVID, thankfully, but he caught a virus in Barcelona and had to qualify when he had a severe stomach upset, but it wasn't food poisoning. But sadly as well, he also had diarrhea, which isn't great. And he had to literally do the racing and qualifying. And he said, actually, I think to one of the reporters, that during the race, it was the hardest ever to hold going to the toilet. Now, everyone here will know how desperate you can be for a toilet, especially when you're not well and you've got diarrhea. It really is a fight as well. So for Lando Norris not to actually do that in the car was absolutely amazing, heroic effort there. But yeah, he had some sort of virus in Barcelona, and then he's got food poisoning here. So he's just a very susceptible young man, as well as Lando Norris is as well. He is like 12-year, make sure he doesn't have any illnesses as well, because he hasn't had all his jabs yet. But Lando is such a special driver as well. He's one of the ones you look in Formula One and think, it's a bit. Do you know that scene in The Simpsons where everyone goes, "Not Lenny"? In Formula One, it's not Lando. It's that type of relationship. Everybody really loves him, and everyone's really upset if something happens to him. And there was drivers all over just making sure he was all right after qualifying yesterday. So it's a really, really good team atmosphere there, and it's really good feeling in the paddock. And yeah, Lando fighting that food poisoning is going to be something to watch in the sprint race later. And he said actually it's easy if it rains because you stay cooler. So if it's a sunny race, then you're going to get hotter and hotter and hotter. If it rains, you do actually cool down a little bit. So Lando's wanting it to rain to make sure he feels a bit better. I can understand that, actually, because if I've got a fever, the last thing I want to do is get in a Formula One car.
Yeah, and the thing is, what we also said about the rain, it can be the great equalizer in racing. It doesn't necessarily mean if it rains that Lando will be on the front row, but it will certainly give him a better fighting chance, as we said, with Kevin Magnussen there to get a decent result, good starting position in tomorrow's race. But if it's dry, I don't think it'll be possible for Lando and McLaren to get a front row start. It'll be very difficult, but we'll see what happens. And I believe we have a comment in the chat room for Matthew.
Perfect. And it's Alberto Cruz Betanzo asking, at what time does the sprint race start for today?
You've got 2 hours and counting. 1 hour, 57 minutes until the sprint race starts. Exactly. Yeah. 1 hour, 57 minutes.
Yeah, and here in the United States, you can watch the sprint race on ESPN News or online at ESPN3 at 2:25 p.m. Eastern Time. That's when coverage is going to start. And I hear a siren. Something.
Yeah, that's on my end.
They're getting home
here.
ready to watch the sprint race.
They're ready to see some history made, hopefully. And
they're going to arrest Safari strategist.
Yes. Now that would be
against humanity. That happened actually once. I can't remember what it was. Someone of these strategists got arrested in the paddock. It was a story. Do you remember a couple of years ago? There was police in the paddock, and they were arresting somebody in one of the teams. I can't remember what it was. But that was actually quite a dramatic moment. Everybody was playing cop show noises as well, and Starchy and Hutch was being played as well because it was one of the. I think it was at Racing Point actually. It was in Belgium. Or was it Monza? Can't remember when, but they were arresting somebody. Where was it? That's going to bug me now. I remember Arnes, I think it was, whoever it was at Jordan. When Michael Schumacher came into Formula One, the driver at Jordan who went to prison, I think because he attacked a taxi driver, he was arrested at a Grand Prix venue at Spa. No, it was at the previous race in 91. He was arrested in the paddock. I think that's what I'm thinking of. But there was something a couple of years ago when police came into the paddock and they'd seized the cars and they weren't allowed to take part in practice one. I think it was when Racing Point and Force India took over and they couldn't take part in practice one in 2018 because the debt hadn't been shifted over yet. Or was it 19? One of the two. But it was that I'm remembering. See, this is what I love about these shows. You just go on different tangents as well to remember things and talk about things. And Dismas is saying, hey, yo, what's up, guys? We're reminiscing. That's it, basically. Just having random thoughts firing off in your head.
Most definitely. That's always a blast here because you never know. I know we're talking about Formula One. You never know what we're going to be talking about specifically when it comes to Formula One. So I think the people have been in for a nice show, 33 minutes into it today. And then Eunice also says Kevin Magnussen first pole. What a drama Friday qualifying. Absolutely. From what we've discussed earlier today, it's just, I think a lot of people on the grid are hoping that he can keep it up there. But starting next to Max Verstappen is probably a very difficult thing to do for any driver this season. So we talked about a little bit of Lando Norris and we talked about Magnussen. I thank you for Demas. That's a great segue into what we're going to be discussing now is Magnussen's teammate, Mick Schumacher, who is starting 20th, which is in last place for the Haas sandwich today on the grid, while his teammate is on the pole. Mick did not advance out of Q1, and we've discussed a lot on these shows that his future has been up in the air. Like, we thought it was going to be a for sure thing. He's going back for next season. Now, not really so sure if he'll be even on the grid next year, as there is 1 or 2 spots remaining. Is this a major setback for Mick's F1 future in 2023? And could it hurt rumors of him going to Red Bull in some role with AlphaTauri or even a test role?
Well, Matthew, to answer your question, and looking at Mick's career, he typically needs a few seasons, to really get going in whatever series they in, as you've seen in his junior racing career so far. But in Formula One, he's had some highs, but definitely a lot more lows than highs. And I think a lot of people would be really shocked to see Mick Schumacher not on the grid in 2023. If it looks to be that way, apparently Haas is going to be making a driver's announcement very soon, potentially, but before the season finale at Abu Dhabi. So we'll know who'll be taking that hot seat next year. Could it be Mick Schumacher or could it be someone else? I know Nico Hulkenberg's name has been mentioned, and also Antonio Giovinazzi also could be a contender for that seat. And in order to stay involved in F1, if you have to take a test reserve driver role, sometimes that's what you have to do. I know Josh and I, we talked about on Grid tonight in previous episodes that Audi's going to be coming in with Sauber, as Alfa Romeo is going to be exiting, so that could be a potential spot there for Mick Schumacher later down the road, where you have a German manufacturer, German driver. I feel like that might be a perfect fit for Mick Schumacher. I know Red Bull's trying to figure out some things like who's going to be their reserve and test driver next year, I think that would be a great role for Mick Schumacher to stay involved in Formula One. But based on what we know right now, things don't look good for Mick Schumacher being on the grid in 2023. We don't know if he's going to stay involved with F1 or if is he going to try to venture out in another series. And Ferrari have the hypercar program going on in the World Endurance Championship. They haven't announced their drivers yet. I wonder if Mick could get a role with that, to try to keep the Ferrari types going. And I know personally, I love to see a Schumacher race an IndyCar, but unfortunately, it seems like a lot of those seats are taken up on the grid. But it'll certainly be interesting to see where Mick lands next year. And I know in previous episodes, Josh, you've been saying, that Mick Schumacher will absolutely be on the grid next year. There's no question that Mick will be on the grid. Since then, have your opinion on that changed?
I don't know what you're talking about. Sorry, the elevator's going on. I think my opinion's changed a little bit, to be fair. It was my opinion that he would be on the grid with Haas next year, because I didn't think they would take Hülkenberg, because Hülkenberg was being lined up to being kept at Aston Martin as their reserve driver. That's now changed. Felipe Drugovich has taken over that role alongside Jess Hawkins. Hülkenberg's been let go. There was rumor he was going to go to Alpine. That got taken over when Gasly went there. And then it was supposed to be Schumacher at Aston Martin to replace Vettel. That got changed as well, because now Alonso's gone there. So Schumacher was supposed to still stay on the grid from Japan when we were talking about this at the Japanese Grand Prix just a couple of races ago. It should have been Schumacher on the grid alongside Magnussen next year. Since then, though, Hülkenberg got let go from his contract at Alpine as well as their reserve driver, got let go at Aston Martin as their reserve driver as well, got changed over everywhere, which is now put him in the position where Hülkenberg can now be a free agent and go to Haas. Ricciardo also changed the mix there as well. Ricciardo did want to go to Haas, but he's now been picked up by Mercedes, and it's going to be their third driver while he looks for a seat for 2024. I know something that I can't say about Hamilton and who's going to replace him in a year's time, but it won't be Schumacher and it won't be Ricciardo. That's all I can say at the moment, but I'll tell you off air because I'm nice. But it's going to be difficult. I can't see where Schumacher's fitting in anymore. I would have said Mercedes, but now I know what I know. It's not Mercedes. So I think Schumacher's time in F1 is done. And I think what really killed it, as I said earlier on the program, was yesterday in qualifying. And it hurts me to say because he's a great driver, but he has underperformed a lot in the second half of the season when he's been told directly that this is where you need to perform. He hasn't done it. So unfortunately for Mick, I think the only high we'll see in Formula One is when he led the lap in Japan as well. And it's a disappointment, but maybe he'll get picked up by AlphaTauri when they decide to throw Yuki Tsunoda out. Although because I don't think Liam Lawson's going to be in Formula One. I think that's a wild thing. He'll be a development driver, but I don't think he'll be in Formula One. I think that might be something for Schumacher if they throw Yuki out. So maybe Schumacher back in 24 and Ricciardo stays as third driver at Mercedes. That's pretty much it. But yeah, I know something about Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes coming up that I can't tell. I can't say anything until Hamilton's contract gets announced in a couple of weeks' time. But then I can tell you what I know. So you have to wait until one of our off-season shows on Grid Tonight.
And Josh, I'm really glad you brought up Liam Lawson because it's rumored that he's going to be moving over to Super Formula next year, and potentially could see Théo Pourchaire there as well. So could see two current F2 drivers racing in Japan in 2023. And you mentioned Yuki Tsunoda. Yeah, next year going to be really huge for him because if Yuki doesn't perform, he could very well be out of Formula One at the end of 2023. And interestingly enough, Takuma Sato, we heard some news on him from motorsport.com that it looks like he's going to be driving a third Delcorn racing car in the NTT IndyCar Series next year. And Sato's full-time IndyCar career appears to be over, and he'll probably be running an IMSA program next year with Acura, Honda, along with running all the ovals for Delcorn Racing. And Japan has said in recent years that they want to see another Japanese driver full-time on the grid after Takuma Sato is done. But, there hasn't really been any young Japanese drivers who have been emerging who could potentially take that spot as a full-time Japanese driver racing in IndyCar. But the only driver that would make sense, if it doesn't work out in Formula One, is Yuki Tsunoda. I think he'd be perfect for the IndyCar Series. So we want to just throw that in there.
I agree. I think Tsunoda would be a great fit for IndyCar. I think he's a downside better than Nicholas Latifi going over there, because Latifi, he was good in F2, but he struggled everywhere else. Apart from he struggled in every single series, actually, bar F2. But I think Tsunoda, great fit over there. I completely agree with you, Kobe.
And I think we don't, as somebody who's more of a NASCAR contributor to the show, with silly season is great with NASCAR, but when you hear the silly season rumors, predictions, everything along the lines with Formula One and IndyCar, it just opens your mind to see how fascinating it really is. So just to hear you guys discuss just now about potential Formula One going to IndyCar, Formula 2 actually going to NTT instead, it's just very, very fascinating. And then just mention, we talked a little bit about how the sprint race will be starting around hour 45, something along the lines. Joshua will be on air for that. The link is in the video description to today's sprint race to watch along. And we've been missing somebody a little bit today, so we're going to bring Joe back in today for everyone's favorite game.
Oh, hopefully we can hear. I think there's a bit of a problem there.
Oh, yeah. So our apologies. I hit the wrong button, guys. So only Formula One left. I this is what happens when you're live. So we encourage everyone to comment on who they think will win the Formula One race on Sunday. Not the sprint race today, but for the Grand Prix on Sunday. So we're gonna start with you, Joshua. Who wins this Sunday's race at the Brazilian Grand Prix?
Max Verstappen will win. I don't think it's going to be Lewis Hamilton. I've been saying all year that this is probably their only last shot to win it, but unless it's wet, then it's not going to be him. So Verstappen will win tomorrow's race. He'll walk over as he has done all season long and bore us all. The sprint race, I think, will be a lot more interesting. If it rains, Magnussen. If it's dry, Verstappen, with a challenge as well on the grid from Russell. But it's going to be a really bizarre one. As you say, only Formula One left now, and it's quite a new day now.
Yeah, and for me, I have to stick with the Mercedes train. It hasn't worked for me all season, but I think if Lewis Hamilton can break that streak and continue to win every season with the Grand Prix since he's been in Formula One, I think it's going to be here. So I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton. For sprint race, I don't have an opinion on that one, because I feel like that anything can happen. But for this one, I'm going to go Lewis Hamilton. Let's see if he can get it done.
For this race, the Grand Prix, I'm going to go with George Russell. He's going to pull it off. He's going to have a solid sprint race. At most, maybe he'll fall down to fourth. But if we have the weather as predicted, I think he's going to capitalize and have a clean race and take the win in Brazil.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see if George Russell and Mercedes can get a win, so they don't have to go 2022 without standing on the top step of the podium. But I have to agree with Josh. I'm going to go with the easy pick here. I think Max Verstappen has the upper hand this year, and I believe we're going to see another Red Bull victory. And now moving on to a quick update from World Rally Championship, the final round of 2022 for the Rally Japan. All trying to get the last one of the year, and two major developments in the race. First, Dani Sordo's car went up in flames during Friday's event.
The big things I think people got to realize with this is there are the telemetry, the black boxes. They could get the data. It's still going to be pretty vague as what it's going to show. We're not going to have evidence of, was there some sort of fuel leak that got somewhere and ignited it. And then once that ignition source was heated up, it was hard to extinguish. The interesting thing, it was on the right side, the right rear. So it could be apart from over there that started this all and unfortunately ended the car essentially racing career. Hyundai said they were going to retire this chassis, brand new chassis next year, but overall still it's a big crushing blow considering they're going to be out of a car next year. But overall, I think the FIA World Rally Championship, they'll be working with Hyundai with whatever they could find and hopefully find some source of what caused the ignition of the fire. There could be some additional steps to prevent that from happening. That's a big step because, like you said, we haven't seen anything like this. I know Oliver Solberg had a smaller fire earlier in the year, but that was after he crashed and got damaged. This was an undamaged car less than a mile into the opening stage and went up in flames.
Yeah, and the surprising thing is about this entire situation, Joe. Typically, when you see major regulations change like this, we're adding hybrid power to these World Rally Championship cars. You'll see a lot of teething pains throughout the season. Though with the NASCAR Next Gen car, we saw problems with that car all year long. Even to the final race when Brad Keselowski's car caught on fire last weekend at Phoenix. The Fords in the NASCAR Cup Series, they just caught on fire more times than not this season, and we really couldn't explain it. And that's why it's, really surprising to see, the World Rally Championship car, the Hyundai, catch on fire like this. And luckily it's at the end of at the very end of the season, so you'll be able to recover from that. But at the same time, such a shame, to lose a car like that, to see it burn to the ground. And it's really crazy that they burned for over an hour. If that happened in any other racing series in the world, people would be screaming bloody murder. They would be all red in the face and very angry, because that would be considered unacceptable. I'm not sure if that's considered acceptable at all in the World Rally Championship world or and all that. But just really sad to see a car burn to the ground like this. But more importantly, I'm glad Dani Sordo and Cadito Carrera were able to get out of the car unscathed. And the other dramatic moment, Kali Rovanpera lost his front grip and slid into a rock wall, and so his chances of winning are gone. Unfortunately, not going to pick a winner point there. Thierry Neuville is the leader of the Rally Japan right now overall, with Elfyn Evans and Ott Tanak rounding out the top three. And we have 5 more stages this weekend. The 2022 World Rally Championship season comes to an end.
After this weekend, we're down to the final 3 races in 2002 for the grid ranking, with Formula 1 and 2 more from the Australian Supercar Series. But there's definitely no shortage of programming here on the Grid Network, with Roundtable coming back November 23rd. We'll be off a few days in observance of Thanksgiving here in the United States, and give everyone a well-deserved break after a long but fun 2022 racing season. And we encourage everyone to subscribe to us right here on the Grid Network, and follow us on Twitter at Grid Ranking and Grid_History, where we'll be posting news updates, including past episodes and special programming from the Grid Network. And of course, we encourage everyone, be sure to watch along with Joshua the sprint race, link in the video description. Follow us on social media all over the place: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and of course, use public.com to invest in the stock market. Use the referral code GRIDNET. Gets free money to start investing in the stock market on public.com. For Joshua Birch, Matthew Bro, and Kobe Lamas from the Podium Finish, I'm Joe Sandiego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the races. Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform, public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDNET for your free $5 to invest and start investing and networking on public.com.